Welcome into the peer review tutorial. In the last video, we discussed that what we basically check before accepting the invitation. And in this video, we will discuss that what we do with the paper in the first glance when we accept the paper. And secondly, the four-step methodology which is used to review the paper. And the third point is some ethical considerations such like plagiarism, data fabrications, figure manipulation, etc. We will also discuss these ethical considerations with the paper. So the first thing is the four-step procedure which is used, the four-step methodology which is used to review the paper. So the first thing is when you receive the paper, the first step, you put a first glance of the paper. You check its title, you check the abstract, you check its figures table which is used in the paper, you read the summary of the paper, you check its heading, that is it in the proper way or not, you check the references of the paper. After that, in the second step, you go for full read, and in this full read you check everything possibly. For example, in the title you check that is the title having the full keywords, for example the population, methodology and outcome in the title or not. The abstract have the aims, objectives and the problem or not. Similarly, what is discussed in the methodology, what should be discussed in the introduction, either these things are discussed or not. And if something are missing in the paper, then you note down all these things. In the second full read, which is the third step, in the second full read you check the minor things, for example the issues in the grammar, issues in the figures, etc., missings and manipulations in the references. And in the fourth step, which is usually the final step, you conclude your findings, you write down your findings, suggestions, recommendation and especially verdict. So this was the four steps procedure which is used to review the paper. Let's revise is the first one is you put the first glance in the first step. In the second step you go through the full read. In the third also you go toward the full read but for the minor issues. And the fourth step is you conclude your recommendation and suggestions. So in the first glance, let's discuss the first glance. When you receive the paper, what you have to check? We check the title of the paper, we check the abstract of the paper, and we check the summary and references of the paper. In the abstract, what we have to check? As I discussed, in the abstract we have to check that either this abstract is containing all the important keywords of the paper or not. Actually the methodology is that the title should have the population, the title should have the outcomes, and the title should have the methodology which is used for these outcomes. For example, in my research case, the title of my research paper, the title of my thesis, IaaS revenue maximization by optimizing resources in cloud computing. In this case, the population is the cloud computing, the methodology is the optimizing the resources, and the outcome is the maximizing the revenue. After that we go toward the abstract, and in the abstract we check that the author is discussing the main problem, the aims and objectives of the paper, the methodology which will be used to obtain these aims and objectives, and some discussion of the result. So if anything is missing in the abstract, for example the problem is missing or the aims or objectives are missing, or they are not supporting with the results, then the reviewer should mention that the abstract is missing these things. After that we check the conclusion, and in the conclusion we check the same thing, that or for example the problem, we check in the conclusion that how the problem is solved. We checked in the conclusion that how the aims and objectives were achieved. And thirdly, that these aims and objectives should be supported with the result, that how these aims and objectives were achieved. And also we check the future directions. So if anything is missing in the conclusion, then the reviewer has to mention that these things are missing in the conclusion. After that, we go toward the references. We check the references, that either references are organized according to the general guidelines or not, and especially the references are missing anything or not, and also that the references are correctly cited in the paper or not. For example, if the paper number 1 is cited somewhere, we check on the paper and check the title and check that either the exact paper, the exact title is cited or not. And after that, which I must discuss here, is the ethical consideration, that we check the plagiarism of the paper, and especially the data fabrication. We check that either data is fabricated or not. If some data is fabricated, you must note these things, and we have to inform the editorial board. We check that the figures table, that either the figure and tables are original, or these things are designed, conceived, prepared by the author, or they are manipulated, they are taken from the internet, from any other research, and they are manipulated and put in the paper. We check all these things, and we check also the idea, that the idea has the novelty or not. And if we find some issues related to the ethical perspective, for example, the paper has the plagiarism, or we think that this idea doesn't has novelty, or this idea is a copy of any other idea, or the data is fabricated, or the figures or the table are manipulated, then we should inform the editorial board, especially when we submit the review to the journal. We submit the review to the editorial board, then we must these things to the editor, journal editor, not to the author. So these were the basic things we discussed in this video, that how we do with the paper after accepting it, after accepting the paper review. We go through it to the first glance. After that, we go toward the full read, and in the full read we check what are missing in the paper, and also we discuss some ethical considerations toward the paper's review. Thank you so much for watching.